Joining us now for World Brief and the review of some of the headlines of today's newspapers from around the world is Adefemi Akinsanya on a Friday. Good morning.
Yes, good morning, Dr. Rubin.
Today is a Muslim.
It is.
I hope that will have implications.
Why not? Is it not Friday? Will we not celebrating? By the time you're coming off here, I'm sure there'll be plenty.
As long as you're alive, there's always something to celebrate. But Femi, you will not escape the implications.
I won't disappoint you. Good morning, Rufai. Good morning. And good morning to you, viewers. Let me tell you what's happening around the world. Now, 3 years after its last outbreak, the Democratic Republic of Congo declared a new outbreak of the deadly Ebola virus, which has killed already at least 15 people with 25 suspected cases. Now, the Congolese Health Ministry says samples tested on Wednesday had confirmed the presence of the Zaire strain of the virus. Now, according to the ministry, the first signal for this new outbreak came when a 34-year-old woman who's pregnant was hospitalized in the Kasai province on the 20th of August with symptoms including high fever and vomiting. But it did not say whether the woman had died. Now, Congo has experienced 16 Ebola outbreaks. The devastation of the 2018 through 2020 outbreak killed almost 2,300 people. We also remember here in Nigeria, the 2014 outbreak, which started when an infected airline passenger arrived in Lagos. The spread was, of course, curbed by Dr. Stella Adadevo, who sought to quarantine patient zero, an effort which obviously cost her life, unfortunately, as she became infected. So we will continue to monitor that situation. Now, 26 of Ukraine's allies are pledging operational and financial contributions to security guarantees for Kyiv if there's a peace deal to end the war. And they're now looking to the United States. Now, leaders from the so-called Coalition of the Willing agreed on Thursday on a military plan that includes details of contributions that countries are willing to make during a hybrid meeting, which was co-hosted by the French President, Emmanuel Macron, and UK's Prime Minister Keir Starmer. Now, the meeting was also meant to firm up security guarantees for post-war Ukraine, optimistically, of course, and to sketch out a division of labour among Ukraine's allies. After hatching out their possible contributions, leaders did hold a call with Trump, who was represented in Paris by his special envoy, Steve Witkoff. Efforts continue to put pressure on Russia. And finally, it's not often we talk about the Caribbean, but over in Jamaica, the incumbent Prime Minister, Andrew Holness, has won a rare third 5-year term in office after his Jamaica Labour Party sailed to victory. Holness beat PMP's Mark Golding after an intense campaign projected a narrow lead for the opposition, the PMP. Of the 63 seats, though, being contested, preliminary results showed that the JLP won 34 and the PMP won 29, so a very tight race there. Under Holness's leadership, Jamaica has improved its economy, reducing public debt from more than 140% of GDP in 2013 to just 73.4% in the financial year 2023 to 2024. And the economy is expected to grow by 1.7% this year. There's also been a drastic reduction in crime under the JLP, with a 43% drop in killings so far this year, marking the most significant decline in decades. Holness was also accused of corruption, though, by his political opponents during the campaign, and official voter turnout was just 38.8%, which was only slightly higher than the turnout for the 2020 elections during the pandemic. So those are your stories. I'd love to hear your thoughts before we move on to the papers.
So my fear is, with this talk about resurgence of Ebola, is the fact that when you look at things, hope we're prepared. Because America pulling most of its funds out, the real response to Ebola when it happened then, in fact, when we had that index case, that was Patrick Sawyer, the Liberian American that came into this country and Dr. Adadevo handled, was because of the American CDC. Since then, they've been able to get out a drug called ZMapp. But I don't know the availability of that in a rural area like this in Congo. That's just my fear at this point in time. Since America has been pulling most of its aid, because I know closely of someone that works with the American CDC out of Liberia, and they have helped with, responses to Ebola over the years. So I don't know what the state is like, since we hear a lot of American funding, being withdrawn from the African continent.
Yes.
And the fact that the man that leads the Secretary of Health is a proper anti-vaxxer, It's JFK. And he's RFK, beg your pardon, and he's really dabbled into the CDC. So I'm a little bit ambivalent, but I hope that a good response will prevail. They'll be able to do, the tracing on time, and they'll be able to nip the case in the bud. I mean, definitely, we've always had a Ebola outbreak for many years, over 40 years in the DRC as regards what is going on there. The fight that is going on there is making things also difficult out there. As regards the coalition of the willing, so Europe, true to type, has really done something incredible. They had a meeting yesterday and Steve Witkoff was there. And what they decided in the meeting was, okay, we need to be able to bolster Ukraine's strength if the war ends today. Mm-hmm. In fact, they've even made good their pledge by buying some weapons off the Americans, some Aram weapons, long-range missiles and the likes. They paid close to $1 billion for that.
Yes.
But my fear is the fact, I think it was Dmitry Peskov that replied and said, you cannot give these security guarantees without Russia.
Well,
it's just echoing what Sergei Lavrov had said before in the past, that part of this stopgap, Russia must be there. And Russia is not willing to end the war now. And obviously, like we predicted, Trump has been made a fool again by Vladimir Putin with all of that show-off they had in Anchorage in Alaska, which we knew was going to go nowhere. To proceed with the meeting now, they have not proceeded with the meeting.
Wow.
Trump hasn't met Zelensky. In fact, what Putin had done is to go and meet the likes of Kim Jong-un and the leader of China and show a muscle strength against the West. So we are at a cul-de-sac now. The war is not ending anytime soon. Russia still has a lot of bombs to put out there. The war economy in Russia is even thriving. I heard there was about 4.1% growth. So these are the problems on ground. But I'm happy that Europe has taken a major step. They are saying, okay, this is what they will do if it ends. Let's wait till the war ends. I don't know who's going to talk to them. Another Nobel Prize in the mud for Trump.
Thank you, Rufan.
I like that. You're watching, like you watch on Donald Trump's attempt to get the Nobel Prize.
I want him to win the Nobel Prize.
You do?
Yeah, to be able to show the hypocrisy of Nobel if they give it to somebody like Trump.
All right.
That's what I'm watching for.
Okay, let me talk about public health this morning. And because, of course, it should be of great concern to us as a nation. We know, even though we can say DR Congo is not very close to us in terms of proximity of neighboring countries to Nigeria, but we do recognize the fact that as long as there's movement, between people, and we saw what happened in 2014.
Yes.
Now, the thing about Ebola is because of its high fatality rate, 90%. In fact, the index case that you identified, like you said, she's passed on, the 28-year-old pregnant woman, and we saw how deadly it was when it came to Nigeria. What we often say is that may it not happen again. But a prayer is not enough to save. Prayer is good. I believe in prayers, but I also think that God gives us wisdom to do the right thing. Dr. Chikwe Ihekwazu, in his book, that's the former DG of NCDC, had An Imperfect Storm, is the name of the book. He co-wrote it with his wife. Had talked about his experience during the outbreak of COVID-19. But I think a lesson there was our lack of maintenance of infrastructure, especially after the outbreak of a pandemic or an epidemic or a global or an endemic, as the case might be. And what we shouldn't always revisit efforts that were made when we have a resurgence. What we should be looking at is a prevention. So some of the lessons that we learned in 2014 as a nation, and maybe even as a regional bloc for Africa, because now we don't look out for ourselves alone. For the safety of Nigeria, we also have to look out for ourselves as neighbors. Porous borders. One of the reasons why the spread when I say porous borders, let me talk about checks at borders. Health checks that ought to be done very intently. Some of the times the officers there are derelict in their discharge of duties, and this can then make someone who's coming in. I remember the case of, checking temperatures. Yeah. If you have a cough, if you have a fever, we check you to ensure that you don't come into the nation. So I'm hoping that the airport, the airport health department would be able to pick this up very quickly. Yeah. We don't want the incident to come here and then we start looking for ways to fight it. Perhaps if we did that properly, Dr. Adadevoh will still be with us here. And we always, every time we hear stories like this, always remember the gallantry of this woman and the other health officials who fought in this stead. So I'm hoping, number one, our health facilities. We still have some health conditions or issues that we're dealing with here. Monkeypox is still rife. We still have cholera still rife in some states. We still have, Lassa fever.
Yes.
A few of these things that we haven't really, totally eradicated in Nigeria. So infrastructure, healthcare system, is it now that the resident doctors are still threatening to go on strike, that we have a potential health crisis on our hands? So these are some of the things that we should talk about before the emergence of a new virus or an existing virus, so that we don't have to keep doing the same things. What I'll just say now is, if you're traveling, please pay close attention, especially across the African corridor. Please ensure that you're masked up, you're sanitizing, you're washing your hands. And if you come back, please, if you have any symptoms, think of the larger people and declare.
Absolutely.
Don't keep it to yourself.
Okay, very quickly on Ebola. Ebola was first identified in 1976, and the host agent is the bat. Now, we have in southern Kasai province, according to the Minister of Health of the DRC, Roger Kamba, 28 cases. Out of these 28 cases, 15 persons have died. However, they have on the ground a rapid response team that is trying to address this. Now, the only side of it is that in DRC, they have long-standing experience in managing disease outbreaks. This is the 16th time that you will have an outbreak of Ebola in the DRC. The last time was in April 2022. The time after that was in Uganda. So they seem to have some experience. But WHO, I think we should note the fact that they've responded swiftly.
Yes.
They're already sending medical supplies. They are sending experts to support the team on the ground in the DRC to see how this latest outbreak can be contained. But of course, I understand your concern about what happened in Nigeria the other time when we had the 0.0 case in Nigeria. But I think that there's been some knowledge in managing Ebola, and maybe that kind of situation will not, occur this time around. But to be prepared, is the main thing about eternal vigilance. Now, in Jamaica, the thing to note is that in Jamaica, they don't have what they call term limits. In 2010, Prime Minister Golden, that was the name of the Prime Minister then, tried to introduce term limit, saying that if you have spent more than 9 years, then you can't come and say you still want to be Prime Minister. But that didn't go through. The current person, Andrew Holmes, then took over. Now he has won a third term. What is his selling point? He says he's going to reduce personal income tax from 25% to 15%. The candidate of the PMP, the other party, main opposition party, they only have 2 political parties in Jamaica. They don't have more than 2. The other person says, he will increase the threshold for income tax. Under Holmes, unemployment rate is about 3.3%. Now, homicide, murder cases have been reduced by almost about 43%, particularly in the first quarter. So is this populism that has helped him? Turnout was 39.5%. That's the exact figure, at the end of the day. 39.5%. But the monitors, the observers sent there by the Organization of American States say that it was a very peaceful, and well-processed election. So he's there now. Now, quickly, as for the meeting of the coalition of the winning, 26 of them, 23 European leaders and 3 others, namely Canada, Australia, and Japan.
Yes.
What they are saying is that they will put together a reassurance force on the condition that the war ends. And then they want the support of the United States. That was how, after the meeting, Macron put a call through to President Trump.
Yes.
And he came back to the meeting and said, he has the assurance of President Trump. But the position of the United States is opaque. Stephen Witkoff, the special envoy for President Trump, was at the meeting. Zelensky was there. Now, Trump has made it clear that they are not going to put troops on the ground in Ukraine. The best that they can do is perhaps to provide support in terms of intelligence to other countries who are going to be involved in this. Number 2, Putin says he does not want any force that is looking like NATO or looking like European, even if the war ends in Ukraine.
Yes.
So, in other words, Putin is not interested in ending the war. And Putin is saying that if Zelensky wants to meet with him, he should come to Moscow, which in itself is a kind of capitulation being demanded. Now Zelensky says he will meet in Istanbul, he will meet in Switzerland, he will meet in other places.
Grounds, yes.
But Putin controls over 10% of Ukrainian territory. I don't think he wants to give that up. And we cannot count on the sincerity of the United States, which President Macron appears to be optimistic about. That is the situation with regard to Ukraine, the 3.5 war that Putin doesn't want to end.
All righty. Well, thank you all for your wonderful submissions. Let's take a look at some newspapers now. This day leads with former President Goodluck Jonathan saying that the 2015 general election, which he lost to the late former President Muhammadu Buhari, was full of betrayals. He said the same of Nigeria's political atmosphere, again, full of betrayals and lies. He made these comments at the 70th birthday, as you've already discussed, of the former Edo Deputy Governor and the former Chief of Staff under Goodluck Jonathan, Chief Mike Ogiadome, who he described as an ally that he could trust at all times. The New Telegraph leads with more doubts from opposition voices trailing President Tinubu's claims of revenue growth. The Picture's picture headline shows the president shaking hands with George Akume, who's the secretary to the government of the Federation, one of the many leaders who came to see the president off as he begins his 10-day working vacation, which he will spend between the United Kingdom and France. The Vanguard reports on the police inviting former Kaduna State Governor Nasir El-Rufai and ADC leaders over allegations of conspiracy, disarming of public peace and incitement. The Punch's picture headline shows images from Egypt, Palestine, Iran, and Yemen. Celebrations of Maulid. Today is a public holiday, as we've discussed in Nigeria, for the same celebrations which mark the birth of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. To UK papers now, and the Daily Star says that the writing is on the wall for UK Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner. It's quite literally the case, as her flat in Hove was sprayed with graffiti which said tax evader. Now, the lawyers, she said, gave her the advice to pay £40,000 less stamp duty than she should have denied giving her any advice at all, as they are not permitted to give tax advice. Can you imagine? Keir Starmer says that he will take action in the findings of this ethics inquiry, which may well see him remove her as housing secretary, as he cannot actually remove her as deputy prime minister. So we'll see what action he does take. United Kingdom's Guardian leads with the Labour MPs insisting that Prime Minister Keir Starmer must not meet with the Israeli President Isaac Herzog during his UK visit. It's supposed to be on Wednesday and Thursday. We'll see when that happens, if he will actually see him or not. The Times picture headline shows a picture of the Princess of Wales, who has sparked conversations over her hair, which is visibly lighter with blonde highlights. Now, there had been chatter that she had started wearing wigs. Unconfirmed, of course, and if that is the case, it is important to avoid being insensitive, as we know that Catherine is a cancer survivor. And finally, the picture headline on the Financial Times shows the creative force that was Italian fashion designer and founder Giorgio Armani, who died at age 91 years. He'll be remembered for revolutionizing men and women's wear and for keeping his self-titled business private despite its vast growth. Those are your papers.
All right, I'm so sorry. I wish we could talk about... Oh, so the tax people say they did not advise...
They said they didn't give her advice, and they don't even have the legal powers to give advice. You know, there's a specific legal definition of advice when it comes to tax. They said they didn't even give her...
When you were saying it, Jesse, you and I know that her bringing her son's disability was just an emotional point.
Yeah, well, people will use anything to hold on to the job.
This is the first time I support Kemi Badenoch. Really? If Keir Starmer has a spine in him, he
can't fire her.
Well, thank you so much, Adefemi. It just goes to show that, like President Goodluck Jonathan said, they are liars, politicians, whether in Nigeria or the United Kingdom.